Welcome into Rocket Fuel. On today's show, I'll be talking about three storylines that will stand out after the All-Star break. Of course, the Rockets are currently in their All-Star break as they play the last game against the Golden State Warriors, which unfortunately they lost 105-98 on Thursday. So now the Rockets get a full week off, at least most of the Rockets outside of Amen Thompson, Reed Shepard, and alperensengun before their next game on Friday against Minnesota. And I'll be talking about three topics that to me stand out post All-Star break. So definitely stick around and let's get to it.
Got to get it in. Justice Smith. Jabari for three and the win. Yeah! He got it!
We are here to fuel Rockets News. It's the Rockets Fuel podcast presented by the Believe Network and sponsored by Bet Online. I am your host, Lashard Binkley. I am a credentialed sports writer covering the Houston Rockets and the Rio Grande Valley Vipers. You can always find my written work over on Rockets on SI, which is part of Sports Illustrated. And you can find me on Twitter, X, at Binkley Hoops. And on today's show, I'll be talking about three storylines that stand out to me post All-Star break. The Rockets, of course, coming off a 105-98 loss to the Golden State Warriors on Thursday. Majority of the Rockets are now All-Star break outside of alperensengun. And then, of course, we saw amenthompson and Reed Shepard last night in the Rising Star game. It was reported that amenthompson is actually going to be part of the Sunday All-Star festivities, as they also have a Rising Star team that's going to be competing in the 3-on-3 tournament that they'll be having on Sunday. And Thompson will be part of the Rising Star or Rising Champion team, or whatever they want to call it, that they're calling it these days. Again, it's a totally different format. So nobody really knows what to expect on Sunday, but Thompson will be playing again on Sunday. He'll be playing against alperensengun, who is part of Charles Barkley's team, unfortunately for him, but he's part of Charles Barkley's all-star team, and we'll be seeing that on Sunday. But on today's show, like I said, I'll be talking about three storylines that are standing out to me post All-Star break. And the third one, of course, definitely stick around for that. To me, is the most important one out of the three. But let's go ahead and get started. And the first one for me is the Rockets trying to stay in that top 4 seed. We know the Rockets were the number 2 seed for a long time, probably for like a month or month plus before they start running into injuries and a tougher schedule, and some other teams around them just starting to win more games. And now the Rockets are down to the number 4 seed. They are a game in front of the Lakers right now in the loss column. They're 2 games behind the Denver Nuggets. They are a few games in front of the Dallas Mavericks, who are currently the number 5 seed or number 6 seed. So the Rockets is getting really scary right now as far as the Rockets concerned when it comes to that top 4 seed. If you look at the next 8 games for the Houston Rockets, it's kind of a mixed bag. They do have some tough games in there. It's definitely not as tough as their previous few weeks. That schedule was pretty brutal, and you kind of saw it as far as the Rockets lost 6 straight, then they won 2 straight, and then they lost again. So they've only won 2 out of their last 9 games. So that's definitely something that stood out, and why the Rockets fell from that number 2 seed down to that number 4 seed. But as you look at these next 8 games, they have 4 in a row, 4 at home, which is definitely a turn from the last few weeks where they played at 1.7 of 8 games on the road. They had a pair of back-to-back games. Just a really weird schedule that they had these previous few weeks, and it didn't help with the injuries that they were suffering from. Sengun was out a few games. And of course, we all know about Fred VanVleet's been out a few weeks. We also know that Jabari Smith, of course, has been out since January 1st. They'll be getting both of those guys back, hopefully, post All-Star break in the very first game against the Minnesota Timberwolves on Friday. But like I said, the next 8 games, I mean, if you look at it, there's some tough teams in there, but if you look at the Rockets, will definitely probably be favored in 6, possibly 7 of those 8 games. Of course, they won't be favored against the best team in the league, Oklahoma City Thunder, when they travel to play them towards the end of next month. So that's just something that's going to, kind of play out for the rest of the season. Really, right now, it comes down to, can they catch the Denver Nuggets, who they currently already beat once this season, or will they still be able to hold off the Los Angeles Lakers? And I don't think the Dallas Mavericks are really going to be a team that they necessarily need to worry about, just because they're kind of just all over the place right now. They thought they may have had some when Anthony Davis, of course, played against the Rockets in the very first game, and he was dominant. Then typical Anthony Davis fashion, he went down with an injury, and they really don't know when he's going to be back. And Daniel Gafford also got hurt; he's going to be out for a while. So the Dallas Mavericks, of course, on top of trading away Luka and setting the whole world on fire, are like kind of in a mess right now. So I don't think the Rockets really have to worry about the Dallas Mavericks. They're really the Los Angeles Lakers, who again we really don't know what they're going to be. They won their first game out, and then they lost their next game. So we really don't know what they're going to be with Luka and LeBron. Of course, Luka and LeBron, some of the two of the best players in the NBA. But overall, you really don't know what they're going to be as far as the rest of the season. And the Rockets have 2 more games against the Lakers, which the tiebreakers group may really come into play here for the rest of this season. And it's kind of weird that these games are really spaced out. They play the Lakers in January, and then they don't play the Lakers again until March, and then the last game in April. So that March game in LA could kind of determine as far as the tiebreaker. So if the Rockets win that game, they've already defeated them in January. They'll have the tiebreaker over the Los Angeles Lakers. So to me, staying in that top 4 is very important, especially for a team where majority of the players have not even played a playoff game. Of course, we know that Dylan Brooks and Fred VanVleet in the lineup have already played in playoff games, along with players like Jeff Green, even Aaron Holiday. But majority of the players, like Jalen Green, like alperensengun, of course, amenthompson, and Cam Whitmore, Tari Eason, none of those guys have ever played in a playoff game. So to me, it's really important for them to have that home court advantage. When you're going up against a team, possibly right now would be the Lakers, who have a lot of veteran leadership, who've been there, done that. Necessarily, it's not important. I mean, it's always important to play at home, but it's not as important for them. So staying in that top 4 seed is a big deal for the Houston Rockets. And it really starts post All-Star break, when you possibly have your entire team for the first time since beginning of January. It's going to be really important for the Rockets to get off a good start against a Minnesota team who just beat them previously a week or 2 ago, and has always given the Rockets a hard time throughout the last several seasons. So again, the standings are going to be really important this post All-Star break. The second topic I wanted to talk about is something that is still playing out, because there hasn't been really a lot of names that have came out necessarily since the trade deadline, and that's the NBA buyout market. Usually it's a really hot topic for teams that are competing, teams that have a chance to win a championship, because usually when a player is bought out, they're normally a player that is not necessarily a rookie or a second year in the league. It's usually established veterans, and established veterans usually want to play on good teams, or teams that at least are competing for a playoff spot. And in the last few years, the Rockets weren't necessarily that team, but they are this year. And people around the league are starting to really notice that. So they have a better chance in the buyout market. So far, we really only had a couple of big names. We have players like Ben Simmons that went over to the Los Angeles Clippers. Reportedly, he met with the Rockets, but I never really saw that as a fit, because he just really doesn't seem like an Ime Udoka type of guy. So he went with the Los Angeles Clippers. Alex Len just signed with the Lakers. Again, not necessarily by the Rockets need. The Rockets already have 3 centers. They don't really need center help. What they really do need is point guard help, and we really have seen that since Fred VanVleet has went out. The Rockets really don't have a backup point guard right now. I know Ahmed's been playing point guard, semi-point guard, but really it's been Jalen Green and alperensengun who have really been facilitating the offense. So the Rockets really don't have a backup point guard. They have combo guards in Aaron Holiday and Reed Shepherd, but they really don't have a legitimate backup point guard. So if you look at the list, you have realistic candidates, and on this realistic candidate list, I don't really see any names that stand out outside of Seth Curry. And Seth Curry is not really even a point guard himself, but he does give the Rockets something they desperately need, and that's shooting. He's been a shooter his entire year. That's what's kept him in the NBA. Of course, he's not at the level of his brother Steph, but he's still one of the best three-point shooters in the league. This year, he's shooting 47%. He started in a handful of games so far, but he has played around 14, 15 minutes a game and shooting 47% from three-point range. I mean, that would be a godsend for a Houston Rockets team that we all know struggles. They have struggled shooting for several years now, and they're struggling again this year. Even though it's gotten better since January 1st, actually, they are actually not bottom of the league like they were for most of the season, but they need shooting. And if you're able to bring in somebody like a Seth Curry, who, like I said, he's not a traditional point guard, but at least he's not going to go in there and you have to worry about him turning the ball over or not be able to at least run the offense with the second unit. And also late game situation, you can have him on the court for his shooting. He's the one name on this entire list to stand out because the Rockets really don't need a play like a Cam Reddish. They already have plenty of forwards. They don't really need help at the forward position. I mean, I see a DeLon Wright on this list as well, but again, not necessarily someone that sticks out like, okay, you got to bring him in. He's going to be able to get minutes because you got to remember they have to be able to get minutes on this team as well. And Seth Curry brings something that nobody else on this list and really nobody else on the Rockets outside of maybe one or two players bring, and that's consistent outside shooting. So, and of course, you have to me, not as realistic when it comes to whether they're going to be bought out or not. You have a Malcolm Brogdon, you have a D'Angelo Russell, and I don't think that those players are necessarily going to be bought out, especially as a report came out about Malcolm Brogdon that the Wizards, for whatever reason, plan on keeping him for the rest of the season. He would have been the absolutely perfect backup to Fred VanVleet. I think he, out of every name that I've possibly seen floated around about buyout candidates, he would definitely have been a type of player that I think would have been great for the Rockets. Of course, he also was coached by Ime Udoka in Boston. He would have been, like I said, the prototypical type of player that can come in, and if Fred does, unfortunately get hurt again, he can come in and start for 10, 15 games, and it won't be such a huge drop off like it is right now. But again, I think he's like a long shot to get bought out. There's not really anybody else on this list like, oh God, that's the player the Rockets have to go and get. But it may be some other names that start to pop up because the deadline for players to be able to play in the playoffs on another team, once they are bought out, is March 1st. So once we get closer to the end of the month, we may see more names pop onto that list. But right now, the most realistic player out of everybody on that list to me is Seth Curry. So that's definitely a name to kind of keep an eye on. Another thing to keep an eye on is the fact that the Rockets aren't in the second tax apron, and tax apron is kind of a convoluted thing that the NBA came up with to try to keep some type of parity in NBA. Basically comes down to if you're in that second tax apron, it kind of restricts you on certain things you can do. Like, for instance, you can't bring in another player that doesn't match salary that you're sending out. You can't send out cash and trades, and you can't sign a buyout player above the mid-level exception, which is around $12.5 million. And there's only a few names that you see on this list right here, and the Rockets aren't one of them. So the Rockets can sign a player above that, even though they did use some of that mid-level exception when they brought in Cody Zeller, who I have to imagine at this point is just really there for if they plan on keeping them beyond this year. It's just really just as far as something they can use, somebody they can use in trade, or eventually he'll get cut if they do try to bring somebody in as a buyout, because the Rockets right now are at their roster limit. So those are all things to keep in mind as far as the buyout market. Right now, it's not really any hot names that are sticking out at the Rockets or, they're going heavy on. But as I said, once we get closer to March 1st and teams finally start to work out buyouts, then maybe we'll see some other names pop up on that list. But like I said, the name to keep an eye on right now is Seth Curry. And the third and final topic that I want to talk about today, to me, is the most important topic when it comes to the Houston Rockets, and that's who's going to start post All-Star break. Right now, we know that Amenthompson has been starting in place of Jabari Smith since Jabari Smith went out after that January 1st game when he broke his hand in practice the following day. We also know, of course, when Fred VanVleet gets back, Fred VanVleet is going to go right back in the starting line. So there's no mystery with that. So it really comes down to, is Amenthompson going to stay in the starting lineup? Which, let's just go and answer that now. Won't be shocked because, again, I'm not a coach. I'm not a coach on the Rockets, so I don't know exactly what they're thinking. I'll be very surprised if Amenthompson is still not in the starting lineup when they come back on next Friday against Minnesota Timberwolves. Then that leads to the question, who is he going to start in place of? There's only two candidates. There's Dillon Brooks, and then there's Jabari Smith. And let's start with Dillon Brooks. I kind of want to go through what each player brings in Dillon Brooks and Jabari Smith and what's kind of their negatives to their game to kind of determine who I think is going to actually start, because it's really who should start and it's who will start. Those are two different things as well, and I'll kind of explain that a little bit. But when it comes to Dillon Brooks, his defense isn't where it used to be. He's not the lockdown number one all the time defender that he used to be in the past. His defense is still really good, but he's not a lockdown defender night in and night out. But he is the one of the Rockets, if not the Rockets' best consistent shooter right now. He's still shooting over 37% from 3-point range. Is something, again, the Rockets desperately need on this team. Like I said, he is the defensive anchor of the team, and he's a veteran. And we know that MA really values vets. So that's something to keep in mind when you're talking about should he start or will he start? Because at the end of the day, it comes down to who does MA think will start, because he will make the ultimate decision, not the front office, not the fans, not the other players. MA is going to make that decision. And like I said, you got to look at the positive with Dillon, but also at the same time, his offense has fallen off since the beginning of the year. And like I said, his defense not where it used to be, but he's still a really good defensive player, and he still can make an impact on the defensive end. But like I said, his offense overall at times is inconsistent. So that's something that may also stand out. And also, when you're looking at Jabari Smith, we move over to him. You can't teach height. you can't make somebody taller than they already are. And Jabari Smith is a 6'10", some say 6'11" player who can shoot over anybody in the mid-range. He's one of the Rockets' best mid-range shooters. He's a underrated help defender, something I think a lot of people don't talk about enough. He's one of the Rockets' best, if not best, shot blockers, probably between him and Amen. Again, something the Rockets don't necessarily have a lot of shot blockers on their team. They really don't have any outside of those two players, maybe Tari Eason at times, and occasionally Alperensengun. But Jabari is probably their best shot blocker, definitely their best weak side help defender. And he's also, before he got hurt, he's shooting around league average from 3-point range, around 36% from 3-point range. So you factor all those things in, like I said, bringing the height at that power forward position. And you also start to think about who will fit better together in a lineup. Is it Amen at small forward and Jabari at power forward? Or is it Dillon at small forward and Amen at power forward? And you kind of look at it. If I was the coach, I would start Jabari at power forward and Amen at small forward. What I think will happen is they're going to slowly bring out Jabari back. He's going to start off the bench because they're going to say that they're trying to get him back up to game speed. That's going to happen for a handful of games, and then they will have to make a decision after that. I don't think coming back on Friday that Jabari is going to start, and I don't think that's a permanent decision. I just think that's one of the ways they're going to be able to kind of slow walk this whole process of who's going to be starting, because they're going to say that they're going to have to get Jabari back up to game speed, and they're going to do that by having him play limited minutes off the bench. And then I think that's when they're going to see how it plays out with Dillon and Amen still in the starting lineup and Jabari coming off the bench. Like I said, if it was me, I would have Jabari Smith starting. But it's really going to come down to what MA thinks at the end of the day. And I just think MA really values having a vet like Dillon Brooks in the starting lineup. I'm not saying that's the right decision. I'm just saying that a little bit that I know about MA from talking to him these last couple of years in interviews, post and pregame, and just watching him on the court at games. He just really values having vets like Dillon Brooks, having vets like Fred VanVleet, and that's why Fred VanVleet never goes to the bench. Even if he's having a bad game, he will never be benched in the fourth quarter, because he just thinks ultimately he's going to make the right decision because he's been there, done that. So I think what's going to happen, like I said, they're going to bring Jabari back real slow. He's going to start off coming off the bench a handful of games, and then they're going to make that decision probably after that. So I don't think we're really going to have a resolution to this anytime soon as far as who ultimately is going to be starting the rest of the season. But like I said, if it was me, I would have Jabari starting and Amen at the small forward position. One thing we know for sure, Amen more than likely will be in the starting lineup going forward for the rest of this season, probably, and for the rest of his career. Let's be honest, he's on a star trajectory when it comes to what he's doing out there on the court. So to me, those are the three topics that are three storylines that stand out for this post All-Star. It's going to be a probably the most exciting post All-Star that Rockets fans have been able to see in the last several years, because even last year, the Rockets were hovering around under 500 up until they had that long winning streak in March. So it wasn't like people were like just super excited for post All-Star break, but now the Rockets have a chance to really make some noise in the Western Conference. They finally have back their full team. I know the Rockets struggled. They did struggle without Jabari, but a lot of that also was just kind of a bad combination of tougher schedule, injuries, and then, of course, Jabari was kind of in the mix of that. I don't know if it was necessary because Jabari was out. It was part of it, but I don't think it was the biggest part of why the Rockets struggled. So now we'll see with their full team. At least that's what MA said, that more than likely it's going to happen, that Fred and Jabari will be back post All-Star break, probably Friday. So we'll see how that plays out. They'll have some practices next week. I don't know if they're going to have one or two. They may even have three. But either way, I plan on being out at least a couple of those practices, and hopefully we'll find out for sure that those players will be back, because they are both doing rehab work, I'm sure, as we speak during this All-Star break. Also, I'll be out at the next game on Friday when they take on the Timberwolves. So, of course, we'll have pre and post game. And as you see, we bring you all types of different things here on the channel. I appreciate the support. Make sure if you haven't liked the video, that helps with the algorithm. Also, make sure you subscribe if you're new to the channel. Welcome to the channel. We bring you all things Houston Rockets, not just podcasts, not just highlights, not just pre and post, which most channels you're going to see as far as the Rockets is concerned, not going to be able to bring you because they don't have access like I have access to. So I definitely appreciate the support, and make sure you continue to check out the Houston Rockets and check out the Houston Rocket Fuel podcast. And also down in the comments, let me know, what do you think of the three topics, and who do you think is going to start for the rest of the season? Who do you want to see start for the rest of the season between Dylan Brooks and Jabari Smith once the Rockets have a full roster? And again, I appreciate the support, and make sure you check out the next episode of Rocket Fuel Podcast.